A after B. Yes, I want to be sure that the strings are very, very soft here. Let's try it at B, Boston. B. Yes. Clarinets and bassoon also. Ba, ba. Diminish it, huh? Diminish those quarters. Diminish the quarters, please. And short, da, 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 da. And be sure that you stop the tone because they're staccato. Not da, 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 huh? Once more, Boston. And also, when you have an accent, ba, ba, it doesn't stay forte. Boston. Practice this particular thing. One body. Stop on the dot. All right. One. Yes. Yeah. That's an eighth, isn't it? Da-da-dum, da-da-dee. Let's try it again. Delicate, huh? A little nicer, warmer tone if you can, huh? One. Hold it. One. I was born in Holland, in Rotterdam. In Holland. And I lived there till I was 5. With foster parents after 2 years of age. And then I was brought to California. And my musical life, I suppose it began when I was 10 years old for the simple reason that I used to bite my nails. And the doctor said to my stepmother, I think if you let her play the piano, she'll stop biting her nails. And on such slim beginnings, I became a musician. I was crazy about the piano right from the start. And my first teacher was a girl across the street who was 12 years of age. The first thing I remember anybody saying about me was that, oh, she can play in the dark. She can play in the dark without a light. And I always thought I was extremely clever to put my foot down on the pedal and just manufacture all these great big runs and play lots of mistakes, but I got the general gist of it. And I felt that was great. But of course, it was with lots of pep and lots of temperament, lots of expression, and just terrible as far as technique was concerned. But I was very, very small at my age, and so I was considered wonderful. And then my stepmother was one who went around to different seances and religions and so forth. And so, since I was the only child, well, foster child, I had to go too. And so then we went to these spiritualistic meetings, and they had messages from yonder, you know. And the advantage to me was that the mediums would go into trance and then say that Liszt was standing in back of me. Oh, and then at another time they'd say Beethoven was standing in back of me. And that's where my great passion for Beethoven started, I think. And of course I enjoyed this tremendously because they told me I was going to be a great musician and that Liszt had said I would be a great musician. I was so glad to play for these spiritualistic meetings, because then women would come and hold me in their arms, and that's the only way I got any affection. And then I would sort of dream about having an automobile accident in front of somebody's house, just so they'd pick me up and be affectionate. Those were the beginnings, and then of course the music is one reason why it's everything in my life, because the music was the thing that saved my reason, my sanity, and I used to cry and stroke the piano and say that at least doesn't hurt little children. And then I swore that when I grew up I was going to be nice to little children, because I didn't have a very happy childhood. Then a very important part in my conducting preparation was that we used to go to band concerts Sunday afternoon, Lakeside Park. And Professor Paul Steindorf, you're sitting right by his picture. No, here, there. He was the conductor of the band concerts. And again, I thought, what a wand, magic wand could do, a stick, a little stick. And I got a tremendous crush on him. But when I talked to him about wanting to be a conductor, he said, oh, that's not possible. You'll never have an opportunity. That's not possible.
She will. She did last time. Yeah, she's coming.
Okay.
There's a bunch of the orchestra stuff. Come on.
Well, sure. How are you doing it, isn't it?
You going?
What she'll not do.
is just the way it is.
Kan je dat bordje even wegdoen voor mij? Where were we?
We were in 1929.
We got interrupted because of the gates of Kiev. Yes. And now we have graduated from college in Germany, and I cried my eyes out because I didn't want to leave it. And these Prussians, you know, they could not, everybody's always tickled to death to get out of school, and I always cried when I had to leave school. This happened in California or whether it was in Germany. And then I had my American debut, my Berlin debut, right, of the big orchestra, the New York, I'm stupid, the Berlin Philharmonic on January the 10th, 1930. I conducted the Berlin Philharmonic.
What was the program?
The program was the Dvorak Symphony in D minor, which I'm about to conduct here in Denver soon. And the soloist was a singer, supposed to be a singer, singing a big aria of Beethoven. But she did something very strange. I don't know if you want to hear about that. But
How strange was it?
Well, it was strange in this way. She was crazy to be a great singer, but she studied and lived in Italy, and she had a lover in Italy. And this took place in January.
Yeah.
And without telling me, she sneaked off to Milano to continue her love life with her gentleman friend in Milano. And they, shall we say, were so energetic about it that she came back and lost her voice. That happens not to be very good for the voice, in case you don't know that. Especially when you're singing a Beethoven aria. And I was so mad at her, and I so mad at her, and she said, you don't know anything about love. She says, all you care about is your music. And I said, well, I only know this, that when I have a commitment, I try to fulfill it. And so 3 days before my world debut of a great big concert and orchestra with all the critics coming from all over Berlin, for Germany to damn, because they were so suspicious that I couldn't do anything, and from New York and everywhere, I had to have a different soloist 3 days before the concert. And so I had a pianist who was in our school, and she played the Schumann concerto, which this girl played last night. And so then, the point was, instead of damning, the critics gave such high praise, such tremendous praise, and AP, United States AP, sent it around the United States, and in those days they had rotograveur in New York, and it came in the New York Times, rotograveur, a picture of my conducting the orchestra. One. So I lived in the basement of some funny little, I paid, I think, $10 a week. And one day the phone rang. Antonia, this is Mrs. Prince. Yes, Mrs. Prince. Antonia, I want to ask you something. I could get a concert for you at the Metropolitan Opera House, but it's going to cost me $1,000 because Mrs. Downs says she's not about to have someone conduct who's not known in New York. And she said it would cost her $1,000 to put on somebody not known. She said, I'm willing to pay $500. Do you think you have enough friends who could raise the other $500? I said, why, of course. Privately, I had no idea where, see. And of course, she could have paid the whole thing like that, but she wanted to see what I was made of, see. I said, of course, Mrs. Prince, and I went crazy with excitement, you see. And so I called up my friend, Mrs. John J. White, in Greenwich, Connecticut. Her husband's a stockbroker, and she was a very good friend of mine. And I said, Mrs. White, I can conduct in New York. Help me, help me. We have to fill the second-tier boxes. That's $500 worth. And I told her all the story, and she said, oh, Antonia, I don't know what to do. I said, help me, help me. So she got a committee of her best friends together, and you know how they do in those society groups. She'd call up people. She said, now, I want a box party. Antonia Brico is going to have the Metropolitan. And wouldn't it be fun to have a supper party and then engage a box at the Metropolitan? And the whole second-tier box she got sold to her friends. And every week that she'd get some money, I'd go to see Mrs. Prince with a twinkle in her eye, and I'd say, here's some money toward how are you doing on your half? Are you selling the tickets? Are you able to sell? She says, oh, I managed. She never sold it. She gave them away. And as I dropped the dollars into her lap, she just was so amused, you know, and I got the whole 500. And I said, did you ever get your 500 together? And she says, yes, I managed. And then she said, now you have to have a dress made for this concert. So she had to tailor it, and I had to have fittings and everything. She got so steamed up about this. I was her protege for the year. And all of her friends knew Mrs. Sidney Prince had a protege. And Mrs. Downs said, nobody will be interested in that, having a woman conductor. And the minute she announced it, all the press came to my door. It made the front page of the papers, and woman to conduct in the Metropolitan. And she just nearly died over the surprise of all the press and radio and everything that happened. The night of the concert, I always remember she had her white mink. And she had me in her car with her, of course. And she was much more nervous than I was. I was having a lovely time. I was going to conduct. And so there we were. And this was the most screaming ovation and success that Mrs. Downs said, you may have a second concert without any money, paying in advance. And so we had the second concert. And then Mrs. Downs said, you may have a third concert. And I don't know if you're so disgustingly young that you don't remember the name of John Charles Thomas. He was a famous baritone, and he happened to be the soloist for the third concert that Mrs. Downs wanted me to conduct. And he said, no, I am not going to sing under a woman conductor. And Mrs. Downs said, why? With all this fabulous press, he said, that's the point. Then that will take all the attention away from me. Oh. So he denied me that third concert at the Metropolitan. would it feel to you if you had, in the whole year, 4 performances? Would you like that? All right. I have 5 performances a year. I'm strong enough to have 5 performances a month. I'm essentially a creative artist, and I teach most of the time, and I would like to conduct more than 5 performances. I'm squeezed. I'm frustrated because I conduct 4, 5 concerts a year, sometimes 6, and I'd like to conduct 5 concerts a month. I cannot play my instrument, which is the orchestra. I get an opportunity like last Sunday. I was extraordinarily happy, and that's one. That's like giving a starving person a piece of bread after days of hunger. Does that answer your question? I want to conduct professional orchestras. And I want to conduct in New York. I want to conduct in California.
All over the
in
country.
San Francisco. I want to conduct in Russia.
Yes.
And he owes the name Evgeny Svetlana. I die inside because she is a woman in Russia conducting all the time. Evgeny Svetlana, I know enough Russian, and you do too, that's a woman's name, and it's a woman conducting everything. It isn't now.
And is it that whole time that
The whole time, yes, the whole time. Of course, I'm just talking to you now about it. I don't talk about it every day. I don't let everybody know my heart break. The people closest to me don't understand. It's a perpetual heartbreak. The Denver Symphony, you know what they said about in the Denver Symphony once? Do you know that there's a club here called the Cactus Club? The male club, one of the very, very fashionable male clubs. And the people said, how can we have a woman conductor who can't invite her to the Cactus Club? That's it. And I hate to tell you, but the people who prevented me the most from conducting have been women. Softer, softer. That again a woman. There was pressure to bear from certain sides, though, so that I conducted in Genoa. Mm-hmm. And she said, "I tell you that the audience is going to throw rotten tomatoes and rotten eggs at you." And I said, "No, they won't." And so when the concert came, they were in the trees. It was so packed and jammed. And the concertmaster, it was an all-male orchestra, and the concertmaster said in first-class Italian, because I speak Italian. He said, at the intermission of the rehearsal, he said, "Io domando perdono per I miei pensieri. I beg your pardon for my thoughts before the rehearsal." Not on the pedal. Hand off, but not the foot off. Take the hand off this Barbara, we need 4 violas instead of 2. Otherwise, it's one stand on one and then... Oh, yeah, well, we have them. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I want to. I'm dying to. I'm dying to take it fast. It's just... Yeah, I know it. I just felt that it was getting... I know it. I'm not used to what she's doing in those triplets yet. Try it. Do it. Hey. Just to let her get to it. Just a little bit faster. Try. It's because I was confused about you, see? One day, I happened to make a remark because some musicians wanted to play some ensemble with me. I mean, about 9 girls. They wanted me to conduct them in some little ensemble. And I made this remark, the remark of all remarks, that if 9 girls could play together, why not 90? And so I got a couple of key women together, and I said, how many women musicians are there in New York? They said, there's stacks of them, but they don't get any chances to play in orchestras. And so I said, well, we're just going to see about that. So then I got the Times and the Herald Tribune together, and I said, I'm going to form a women's symphony. And we're going to announce it, and we'll see what happens. Well, they crawled out of all of the highways and the byways and the corners and dusted off their instruments, and they said, you'll never get enough instruments. But I did. The whole full complement, 100 orchestra. We had our first concert in Town Hall, and it was a gratis one, just to interest people and to get press. But anyway, it made a great success, a great sensation, and the New York Women's Symphony was in business for several years. Then, finally, I said, that's fine. However, I want people to mix in orchestras as they do in life. Men and women mix in life, and they should mix in orchestras. Whereupon I changed the Women's Symphony to a mixed orchestra. I said I wanted it that way. I have proven my point that women can play in every category of the orchestra, and I want a mixed orchestra. And then they said that was no sensation anymore. The board of directors wasn't so interested. But the period between 1942 and 1948, where I wasn't conducting very much, and I was in despair, because I don't care how gifted you are as a violinist, if you never practice, you lose. And I knew that here I was sunk, absolutely sunk. And then, one of these strangers, Arthur Rubinstein. I visited him once. in Hollywood. He was very nice to me, and I said, Mr. Rubenstein, can't you help me? You know everybody, can't you recommend me? He says, my dear, I'd be glad to recommend you, but I've never heard you conduct. How can I recommend you? I said, if I conducted somewhere, would you come? If I got myself conducting somewhere where you are, would you come? Why, but of course, the way he spoke, but of course. And so, in my strange mind, I concocted something. I went to New York, and I happened to know, because I conducted New Carnegie Hall with the Women's Symphony, I knew lots of people. And I talked to some of the musicians at the Philharmonic, and I said to one of them in particular, would you be my contractor if I conducted a rehearsal in Carnegie Hall for the sheer purpose of Arthur Rubinstein hearing me conduct? Oh, of course you will, he said. And so we got the date settled. I had found out through the agents when Rubinstein was in town. So I had the contract, engaged 65 extraneous musicians not belonging to any orchestra, 65 musicians, thousands of them in New York. I wrote Mr. Rubinstein a letter and said, then and then and then, see? And he called up Hazel Oberfeld. He said, she's gone to all this trouble. Why, I can't guarantee anything. I can't promise any engagement. She said, you promised you're going to hear her. You do it. Well, of course I'll hear, but I can't promise you goes to all that spend. I can't promise it. Cost me several $100s because I paid for the musicians, my trip back and forth, and so forth, see? So, comes Friday afternoon. See, Thursday night, Rubinstein was playing a concert in Philadelphia. And I was so scared he wouldn't come, I thought I'd better go be sure he's going to be there. And so I went, and it was sold out, couldn't get in. Well, don't ask how I got in. I got in. I sneaked in. And I went backstage, and I didn't say anything. Loads of people corrected, and I stood in front of him like this. And he said, Antonia Brico, what are you doing here when you have to conduct tomorrow afternoon and I have to be there? I said, that's all I wanted to know, Mr. Rubinstein. But he said, I can't stand that responsibility, just me alone. I can't have that, he said. You must ask someone else. Bruno Walter is in town. Why don't you ask him, too? Oh, I said, he won't come. He said, certainly he'll come. And you ask some other, I don't want to be the only one. So I asked Stoyovsky, who was my piano teacher. I called up Bruno Walter. As luck would have it, he was in town. He said, of course I'll come. Then, I forget his name, but there was a Yugoslav man who was married to Borden's Milk. Of course, that's a $1 million concern. And he was married to the heiress of Borden's Milk. And I can't think of his name right now. And I conducted, which I sort of conduct all the time, there's something important because it did so much for me. I conducted the Brahms Second Symphony, and I rehearsed it because Bruno Walter said, there's no point in it if you don't rehearse. I see how you rehearse, see? Now, of course, in German, he spoke to me. And so I rehearsed.
Judy, listen to this one part, will you please? Where we have...
So Bruno Walter and Rubinstein gave me this tremendous recommendation. And then I sent these recommendations to Sibelius of Bruno Walter and of Rubinstein. He got in touch with the Helsinki Philharmonic, something he told me he never did because if he ever started recommending people, they'd all want him to. And the Helsinki Philharmonic wired me and said that because Sibelius asked me, would I accept a couple of engagements in Finland? Would I accept in Finland? And so then, that next winter of 46, the big winter, I conducted in Finland, in Yugoslavia, in London, and in the thing that meant practically the most in all the world to me, my native land in Holland.
1, and 2, and 3, and 4, huh? Viola, you know what that is, huh? Barbara, you know that, huh? 1, 1, All right.
1, 2, 3. Where was the 1? I'm doing it over here. Don't you know you can count? Do it. Even if I don't look at you ever once. I want an accent, diminished crescendo accent. All right, once more, the cut. 1, 2, 3. more inspiration there was in the concert, the harder the fall. That's normal. That's normal. Anytime you have any emotional experience, the aftermath is always difficult, I find. I know I conducted the Verdi Requiem in Carnegie Hall, the first time I ever conducted it. And I had just one performance. Oh, my word. I'll never forget that. I was so in a state of collapse, and there was a big party given for me. And I was such a daze after the performance, complete daze. And there were friends and crying, and there were friends who said, the kindest thing you can do is to take her home. And then a very good friend of mine stayed all night with me, and I did nothing but cry all night. I wouldn't stay in my room. I stayed in a hotel. Because it was just like having given birth to a baby and then they took it away from you. I mean, if you're a violinist and you play a concert, you can play it and play it and play it for yourself, but an orchestra requires such an enormous amount of money and people, and that's why it's such a fascinating affair, probably, because it slips through your fingers. It isn't anything that you can hold. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't do anything but just that one split second. And as I said, the piano you can play and play in the privacy of your domain, but conducting is a public affair from the word go. You have to have people to conduct and people to listen. No, I don't think it's the power. I don't think that's it. I think it's the feeling of a painter with a palette, and you take one color and do this to it, another color and do that. It's a fluid proposition. It doesn't stay stagnant. And there's density to it. I feel that that's three-dimensional, that when you really dig into interpretation, it just speaks to a person in a certain manner. As I say, you either ride very high or afterwards you drop very low. I have a habit of living in the present. And I don't want to think of what's coming or what was past. I just enjoy so tremendously. Some people say, oh, well, in 3 days it's over, or I hate to think of it. I just completely put a block in the past or the future, so that the first time I was with Albert Schweitzer for a number of days, I think it was 5 days, and then he suddenly, I just didn't know where I was going, and I didn't know where I came from. I lived so intensely in that moment, and then he came to me, he says, well, I guess this means goodbye. And I just went all to pieces. A terrible time. But that's the way it is.
What was it like being with him?
Too divine for words. It's hard to explain to people if they hadn't seen his eyes, because he was such a sensational person. He was so humble looking, and he wore old sloppy hats and all of that, but when he looked in your eyes, that's about all you needed to turn you inside out. I thought I knew something about Bach until I studied with Albert Schweitzer. Then I realized that there was so much to learn. We always had our duties, and then while he would be talking to somebody about tropical medicine and somebody else about building the leper hospital, then he'd say to me, now in this particular phrase, you do thus and so. And then he would talk to me for hours at a time at night next to his little piano with organ pedals. And he would sit there and explain everything like that to me. And I played for him, and he talked everything. But it isn't just music I learned from him. Philosophy, life, and so many things, impossible to describe in a few minutes what it meant to be with a man like that for 15 years. And he was knowledgeable in so many fields. Simple person. Something and you got the first step, the subsequent steps would come, and if you were not meant to do it, you wouldn't even get the first step. And then if the second step fell into place, then I was even more convinced, and then the next step and so forth. And the first time that one of my favorite teachers in high school took me to a symphony concert. She took me to my first symphony concert, and it just did it. It just crystallized everything, and I was so absolutely beside myself over that. Dostoevsky, he was one of my great piano teachers, and he said it's perfectly ridiculous. In fact, Paul Steindorf said it was ridiculous. He said it was only because you love me that you want to do this. I said, no, it isn't. I said, I want to. It's not that whether I had the stuff or not. He said that in those days, he said, women can be conductors. I said I'd never forgive myself if I didn't try. But I'd rather die trying. Barrère was my soloist there, but he was also my soloist here. When I first came to Denver to live, he played the Rachmaninoff. And then I just got out of a very sick bed. The only thing was, that was the year when they started sulfa. They hadn't had penicillin yet, but they started to have sulfa, and it made me deaf. And I couldn't hear the high tones. And there was one part, Barrère just jerked me into the time because I couldn't hear. It was a precarious situation.
Was he upset?
No, he knew I was sick. Mostly Russians. Ashkenazi, Richter, Gilels, Cleaner, pianist. Entremont, Philippe Entremont. Oh, and the Spanish. Yes, she's marvelous. When I was studying piano, it was just when many great pianists were rather at the end of their lives. Paderewski and Bauer and Gabrilovich and Joseph Hoffman and Rachmaninoff and Toscanini's son-in-law, one of the younger ones at that time, Horowitz. I'll tell you what first-class conductor who was, and he's pretty old now, and that was Sir Adrian Boult. I knew him very well. In fact, he was the one who pushed through that I conduct the London Philharmonic. He has technique. He has baton. He is very great. I met Stravinsky And I saw, but I didn't meet him, Ravel, and of course Sibelius, the greatest.
Did Sibelius ever hear you conduct his music?
Yes. I have wonderful letters from him to that extent. Yes, he did. It was he who arranged for me to conduct in Finland as much as I did. Oh, you mean Stokowski? Oh, no, he's a first-class conductor. He was a first-class conductor. No, he had marvelous technique. No, he was a first-class conductor. I didn't agree with all of his interpretations of the classics. But you hear Debussy from him, and no, he had first-class technique. He was, oh, Monteux, that's another one. There was another one. And Ansermet. You know Ansermet, the Swiss? Alas, they're all gone now. Klemper's still alive. Did everybody have hamburgers with onions?
8 of them.
Everybody. Oh, my
giant,
gosh.
double giant cheeseburgers.
I'll simply ghastly.
With pickles. Well said. Matter of fact, we
Shall I
saved
take
you
my
one.
glasses off?
No. Well, be comfortable. Do you normally wear your glasses?
No, I don't mind.
We saved you one too. It's in the fridge.
What, with
A
onions in
hamburger
it?
with onions and
You didn't.
everything. Ketchup and mustard. Mayonnaise.
You didn't with onions.
Where are my scissors, dear?
Yo, the scissors, the same ones that
For
I...
how long? No, you have to relax your wrist.
The best Italian ever had. Oh, honey, and don't forget it. There'll come a time when you'll regret it. Oh, I see what you're doing. You know my love for you will drive you growing after you gone. And you're gone I hate to lose you, for I'm so used to you now. For you excuse you for breaking your, what do they call that now, ragtime or jazz? What is this? Your kiss and all the others seem strange. Even and I don't want to say I hate to lose you, for I'm so used to you now. I'm not so sure I want that in public, my dear.